Welcome back to Joy Recovery Radio, where we're dedicated to helping couples find healing and hope after sexual infidelity and betrayal trauma. We share real stories, practical strategies, and deep insights to support you on both sides of this difficult journey. We truly believe this message can change lives, and you can help us reach more people by engaging with our content. Wherever you listen, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, please hit that follow or subscribe button. A quick like and a 5-star review also goes a long way, helping others discover our community when they need it most. Let's dive into today's episode.
So last week we talked about a prideful heart and how we have to humble ourselves and take on the mindset of a servant and serve our partners in order to avoid abusive behaviors. And today we're going to go a little bit further into what is the role of self-deception. So the very first thing I want to explore is when the Bible talks about the heart, it's talking about the core or center of who we are, and it has 4 components to it. It's our desire or our motive. Secondly, it's our thoughts or our beliefs. Thirdly, it's our will or our decisions that we make. And then finally, and so a lot of times especially when we were acting out, it began with the desire to act out. But what followed that desire was some kind of self-deception so that we could justify what we were about to do. And that was the thoughts or beliefs. Then we made the decision, and then we had emotions that followed. Often the emotion was shame. And shame would actually feed that cycle of the desire to act out again to try to mitigate the shame. So when Scripture talks about our heart, that we should guard our heart because everything we say and do flows from it, it starts with desire, leads to thoughts, leads to a decision, and then emotions follow. And so self-deception in a very real way is a supporting column to our addiction. It was foundational to our addiction. Before we act out, we have to convince ourselves that the thing that we're about to do is somehow okay. It's somehow justified. And we do this so that we can live with ourselves. Scripture puts it this way in Jeremiah. It says, the heart is deceitful. So our desires, our thoughts, our wills, our emotions, our heart is deceitful and it's bent towards wickedness, doing the wrong thing. Who can really understand it? Because we're capable of deceiving ourselves. But God answers his question and says, I, God, search the heart and I test your thoughts. So what is self-deception exactly? Self-deception, we're going to define it as the capacity of our heart to hide the truth from ourselves if that truth is too unpleasant. So in a very real way, it's not sex addiction that destroyed our life. It was the denial of our sex addiction that destroyed our life. Before we ever acted out, we deceived ourselves so that we could deny that it was really a problem. And before we ever lied to our partners, we lied to ourselves. And we believed our own lies. You could put it this way, this kind of ratio. For every lie that we have told our partner, we first told ourselves 3 to 4 lies to justify that. Tim Keller puts it this way. He says, self-deception is not the most terrible thing that we do, but it's the reason that we can do the most terrible things. Self-deception is the ability to know the truth and yet not know it because we don't want to know it. So the truth is there, but we smother it with these techniques and these tactics that we use to deceive ourselves. So let me just use a practical example. Let's say Jacqueline and I are driving down the road in our car and we both hear this loud knocking noise. And she says, that doesn't sound good. We need to get that looked at. And I say to her, oh no, that's a normal noise. All cars have a little bit of knocking like that. There's nothing really to worry about. And I turn up the radio so that we don't hear the knocking. Well, the truth is there, but I'm smothering the truth with various techniques and I'm deceiving myself because I don't want to believe that something's wrong with the car and I don't want to go through the expense of taking it to a mechanic. Another example of this is when self-deception is we know the truth and yet we don't know it at the same time because we don't want to know it, comes from World War II. Eisenhower was going into all of these towns in Germany, and all the people would say, we had no idea that this Holocaust was happening. We had no idea that the Jews were being slaughtered. And Eisenhower got tired of all the excuses. And so in one particular town in Germany, he forced the citizens and the mayor and his wife of that town to go to the nearby concentration camp and actually see the evidence and see the bodies so that they could not be in self-deception anymore. That night, when they got back home, the mayor and his wife hung themselves. And because when we buy self-deception, it eventually leads to self-destruction. They knew that those Jews that were being carted off to a supposed work camp, they had seen the breadcrumbs. They had seen the evidence. They knew what was really going on, but they did not want to admit. They did not want to know what was going on. So they held up this self-deception that was completely destroyed when the evidence was right in front of them in the form of bodies that they could no longer deny. There are three primary ways that we smother the truth. There are three primary ways that we self-deceive. The first one is we blame shift. And this is one that is very common for sex addicts, especially initially after discovery. In fact, Dr. Skinner, in his study of over 2,500 sex addicts that are in a relationship with a betrayed partner, he found that over 90% of them, in one way or another, blamed the partner for their behavior. Over 90%. This is blame shift. This is a way that we deceive ourselves. Jesus put it this way. He said, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in someone else's eye and pay no attention? We're blind. We pay no attention to the log that is in our own eye. Do you see the comparison? A sawdust, a speck of dust in someone else's eye, and a telephone pole in our eye. What Jesus is saying is we are inclined to divert attention away from our own heart issues. This is a form of image management. This is how we spin what we did. This is airbrushing reality for our partners. And Jesus also makes the point that we fail to measure the significance of our own heart issues. He basically says that our issue is 1,000,000 times the size of someone else's issue. But to get the attention off of our issue, we put the attention on their issue. This is commonly known as tit for tat. We minimize our issues, but we supersize our partner's issues. One very tragic story that I heard just this week, one of the worst stories I've ever heard of a betrayed partner and the abuse that she endured, was in giving birth to one of their children. She had a complication that left her completely paralyzed from the neck down. And imagine raising kids and going through that birth and going through that transition as a mom and a wife of now not being able-bodied anymore. It was shortly after that horrific experience that she had put some monitoring software on the computers as an effort to protect the kids from seeing anything inappropriate. But she was horrified to see the report that her husband had been looking at pornography. When she confronted him, he initially denied it, like a lot of us do. But she showed him the evidence, and he could not deny it any longer. And so he cried crocodile tears and he said, "I'm so sorry. I repent. I'll never do it again. Please, please forgive me." But in the process, he blamed her paralysis, that it was her fault, that he had to do this because he couldn't get his needs met because of her paralysis. So not only has she gone through the horrific experience of losing the use of her body, but now her husband, who in fact had been looking at porn since before they were married, and it had nothing to do with her paralysis, blamed her paralysis for his behavior. This is an example of blame shifting. This is how we deceive ourselves so that we don't have to face the painful truth of what we've done.
We often talk about addiction as a cycle, but did you know that the dynamics of abuse and IAD behaviors are also cyclical? It's a painful loop of conflict, apologies, and those fleeting moments of calm that never seem to last. If you've ever felt like you're walking on eggshells, you know exactly what this feels like. We want you to know there's a way out. That's why we're hosting a free live webinar on the cycle of abuse. In this session, we'll give you the clarity to understand the pattern you're in and explore the Minwala model to show how power and control fuel these dynamics. Most importantly, we'll share practical strategies for both the addict and the betrayed partner to interrupt these destructive patterns and create a path toward genuine healing and hope. This webinar is about more than just understanding the problem. It's about giving you the tools to find a way out and empowering you to begin your healing journey. This webinar is coming up shortly after the recording of this episode. It is on September 6th at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Space is limited, so reserve your spot now at joy-recovery.com/webinar. We truly believe that healing is possible. Hope to see you there.
A second primary way that we deceive ourselves or smother the truth is justification or rationalization. And the key word there is rationalization. With our rational mind, we begin to believe our own lie. We take that which is irrational and we convince ourselves that it's rational. And so to justify our behavior so that we can live with ourselves, so that we're not mired in shame, we will tell ourselves things like, I deserve this. I've been a good husband. I've been a good provider. I've been a good dad. I've worked hard. I'm entitled to this. I deserve a little bit of stress relief. Or we compartmentalize and say, this is a separate part of my life. This has nothing to do with my real identity. Or the person I am at work and home, that's the real me. This is just a fantasy world. That's all this is. Or to justify or rationalize our deception to our partners, we'll deceive ourselves with thoughts like, well, I told her most of the truth, but the part that I'm still hiding, that's actually to protect her, which is a total lie. And the truth is we're protecting ourselves. A third way that we smother the truth and deceive ourselves is through minimization or denial. Anytime you use the word only, you're probably minimizing. I only did this. I only did this many times. Or anytime we use the phrase, well, at least I didn't blank, we're minimizing. It was just a look. That's all it was. Or I can stop anytime I want. I'm not out of control. It's not that big of a deal. Every man does this, and any man who says he doesn't is lying. Sometimes we even minimize what we've done and we blame shift in the same sentence. Things like, God gave me a high drive. Do you see the subtle way that we're now blaming our Creator for our behavior and minimizing our responsibility for it? Things like, I'm not hurting anyone. There's no victims in what I'm doing. Or I'm just relieving stress. A lot of brothers in recovery will use minimization in their middle circle. If you're familiar with the three circles, the inner circle are bottom line behaviors that define a relapse. Outer circle are behaviors that enrich our life and keep us far away from the inner circle. But the middle circle is this vague area where we're supposed to practice caution and be careful and be sure that we don't spend, quote, too much time in the middle circle. And what a lot of men will do as a part of self-deception is include various ways to engage in lust in their middle circle, but still be able to call themselves sober. This is a very blatant form of self-deception. I would go on to argue that shame itself is a form of self-deception. And the reason I say that is because when we go into shame, we are believing lies about ourselves. We are deceiving ourselves. For example, shame tells us that I'm insignificant, I don't matter, or I'm incompetent, I'm a failure, or I'm in prison, I have no power or autonomy or control. All three of those are lies. When we go into shame, we are practicing self-deception. The fact is you do matter. The fact is you're not a failure. The fact is you have more agency and autonomy and control than you're allowing yourself to believe. Unfortunately, what we do with our shame is we often sexualize it. We use acting out as a way to mitigate or offset our shame. For example, with insignificance, feeling like I don't matter. We use our sexuality to find some form of validation. We think that if we pursue this sexual encounter, whether it's real or it's a fantasy, that will confirm that I really am desired. I really do matter. I really am wanted. And so we use our sexuality to try and deal with our shame, which only increases the shame. Or if we're struggling with incompetence and we feel like I'm a failure, then we use our sexuality to create this alternative reality. And in that arena, I feel like I'm successful. I feel like I have power. I feel like I'm not such a failure. I may feel like I'm failing at home and I'm failing at work, but at least I feel like I'm enough in this area. Or with imprisonment, when we feel like we have no power, we have no autonomy, we have no control. Then in a very real way, we use our sexuality and the deception involved with it to try and control others. We engage in escapism, which is a temporary illusion of freedom. But the freedom isn't real. We actually find out that we've become enslaved to our sexual behaviors. Well, the real question is this: how do we stop? How do we stop this self-deception? How do we stop smothering truth when it's too painful for us to admit or embrace? The antidote to self-deception is self-awareness. The opposite of self-deception is self-awareness. And the best way to grow truly in self-awareness and expose our own lies that we're believing is in an intimate relationship with God and others. And in those two relationships, it brings more self-awareness to our relationship with ourselves. Psalm 139 puts it this way. David says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the right path." Here's what I want to say about the word know. And I want to be careful and I want to be appropriate in the way I explain this. That word know is a word of intimacy. In fact, if you go all the way back to Adam and Eve at the beginning of the Bible, it says that Adam knew his wife and she conceived and gave birth to a son. That word for sexual intimacy, that word that Adam, quote, knew his wife and she conceived a son, is the same exact word that's used right here in the way God knows us. We're talking about God wanting an intimate relationship with us, and he has a way of shining his spotlight into our heart and exposing the self-deception, exposing the lies that we're believing, That's why David said, "Search me, O God, and intimately know my heart. Test me, know my thoughts. Point out anything that's offensive to you and lead me in the right path." Another way that we can grow in self-awareness and reduce self-deception in our life is through trusted relationships with others. One of the things that they can do to expose our blind spots in our self-deception is to give us the gift of feedback. When we have a heart of pride, we're not open to feedback. We don't want to hear criticism. But when we have a humble heart and we want to grow and we want to get rid of the self-deception in our life, then we will have honest, authentic relationships with healthy brothers, and we give them permission to give us feedback. Call us out on our own BS. What's great about being in recovery with other healthy brothers who struggle with the same addictive behavior that we struggled with is that they know the self-deception. Their self-deception meter is very sensitive and very strong. Why? Because they use the same lies. And so we often have a difficult time finding the log in our own eye, but we're quite adept at finding the speck in our brother's eye. So leverage that. Enter into authentic community with healthy brothers in recovery who you give permission to speak the truth and love to you and to call you out on your own deception. And then finally, understand that our partners are a gift from God as a source of feedback. They know us better than anyone. They spend more time with us than anyone. They're going to notice the self-deception. And we need to give them permission without defensiveness to point out any self-deception that they see in our life. So in closing, let's just consider some of these reflective questions. What is one painful truth that I'm avoiding that I need to face? How have I blamed my partner for a problem that is actually mine? In what areas of my life am I minimizing the impact of my actions? Fourth, whom can I trust to help me see my blind spots and hold me accountable to the truth? And finally, how can I cultivate my connection with my higher power so that he can search my heart and test my thoughts?
That wraps up another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. We hope our conversation today brought you clarity, comfort, or a new perspective on your journey. Remember, healing is possible, and you don't have to walk this path alone. To learn more about how we can support you, visit us at joy-recovery.com. There, you'll find information about our individual and couples coaching practice designed to provide tailored support for both addicts and betrayed partners. You can also explore our various online groups, offering safe and confidential spaces for connection, shared experience, and growth. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, choose joy.